Timekeeping started with water clocks, sundials, and candle clocks, especially among the religious part of the society. Regulating time meant regulating people's day, dividing the day into sections. It also meant managing resources. Controlling time meant controlling people's working life in Egypt and Babylon, for example. And it also meant controlling people's monastic life. We all know sundials and water clocks, but an interesting and unique timekeeper was crafted approximately 800 years ago when the renowned engineer Al-Jazari crafted an intricate device known as an elephant clock. Drawing from various cultural elements, he incorporated Greek Archimedean water mechanics, an Indian timekeeping system, the Gadi, an Indian elephant, an Egyptian phoenix, Arabian figures, a Persian carpet, and Chinese dragons. Rulers would often commission sundials and water clocks to demonstrate their control over nature and time. The Roman Emperor Augustus, for example, erected an enormous sundial in Rome around 10 BC, which stood as a political monument underscoring his influence. These grand timekeeping devices served multiple purposes. It served the purpose of organizing people's lives. It served the purpose of scientific and cultural achievement, but it also served the purpose of telling to the people the ability of the ruler to restore order in nature and among the society. Through the display of these structures, caliphs, rulers, kings, emperors made a connection between the earthly realm and the divine realm. They wanted to show that they are able to control both the society and the nature. They wanted to show themselves some power, some cosmic power that people would appreciate. Thus, these early structures were not only horological pieces, they were not only horological achievements, they were at the same time political power display. So this way, from early on, there was a strict link between the development of timekeeping and political power. The first mechanical clocks were large, publicly displayed timekeepers in town squares installed by cities or churches to regulate both religious and civic life. By the Middle Ages, mechanical clocks started to emerge in Europe. These were primarily found in monasteries and cathedrals, as religious institutions were deeply invested in measuring time for prayer. By the late Middle Ages, mechanical clocks were seen as symbols of power and prestige. Monarchs and wealthy cities commissioned the most elaborate timepieces to showcase their authority. In 1386, England installed the Salisbury Cathedral clock, one of the oldest working clocks which still operates today. In those times, time was a collective experience shared by the community through sounds of clock bells that dictated everything from prayer to work. Monarchs began to sponsor clockmaking in their regions. The more accurate and grand a clock, the more powerful the ruler appeared. Richard of Wallingford, an English monk and scientist in the early 14th century, built an astronomical clock in St. Albans Abbey that became a symbol of both religious and royal power. King Charles V of France had a mechanical clock installed in his royal palace in 1370, making it a centerpiece of political power. Timekeeping became a way to exert power to the society. Whoever could afford the most accurate, grand, and beautiful clocks, they had the power to regulate the day-to-day life of their subjects. The competitive nature of regions such as Italy, Germany, and France in developing the most accurate and advanced clocks was driven by the desire to show political and cultural dominance. Italian city-states like Florence played a crucial role in the development of early clocks. These city-states were politically competitive, and clocks were seen as a reflection of their advancement. The clock in Florence's Palazzo Vecchio, commissioned in 1353 by Giovanni de' Dondi, reflected both technical achievement and political prestige. Rivalries between France and Germany was not only in warfare, but also in technology and horology. Monarchs and noblemen, they all competed with each other to own the most advanced mechanical clocks. The Catholic Church was one of the first sponsors of advancements in horology. The monastic life required strict prayer times that needed to be measured. But this way, the church was also able to dictate the day-to-day activities of the broader population. In the Middle Ages, timekeeping was largely a public affair dominated by church and state. These massive structures were installed in city centers, in towers of churches that regulated the day-to-day activities of the entire community. But they did not only mark time, they were also symbols. Symbols of wealth, symbols of authority, and symbols of power. This period centralized the hierarchical society where only those that had the power to maintain them, the rulers, the religious institutions, they used timekeeping as a top-down approach. What happened is that in late 15th century and early 16th century, there were technological advancements in miniaturizing mechanisms. This helped build more portable, personal timepieces. And by especially end of the 16th century, then watches were much smaller, more affordable, and portable, which, in my opinion, democratized the ownership of watches, but also it democratized the sense of timekeeping. The invention of the mainspring, attributed to German clockmaker Peter Henlein around 1510, was a major breakthrough. Unlike the weight-driven clocks that required large fixed installations, mainspring-driven clocks could be much smaller and portable. Henlein's portable pieces, known as Nuremberg eggs, were small enough to be carried on a person, although they were still large compared to the wristwatches we know today. These portable timepieces were ornamental at the beginning. They were used by aristocrats and noblemen as pieces of status and power. They were not necessarily accurate, and they were used as luxury items. However, they marked a shift into the personalization of watches, a shift that came from public spaces to personal hands. By 17th century, with the advancement of technology, watches got smaller, but also they got more accurate and they got more affordable to produce, which allowed a wider access to people outside of aristocracy. By the mid-17th century, then watches were more accessible and they became tools, not only luxury items. This way, especially people whose livelihood was depending on accuracy and precision, like sailors, like merchants and tradespeople, they were able and they were acquiring these watches, which led to more democratization of the timekeeping. A notable example of this shift in function was the increasing need for precise timekeeping for navigation at sea. British sailors, for instance, required accurate timepieces to determine longitude while sailing. The development of marine chronometers allowed ships to navigate safely and efficiently, ultimately influencing the demand for more reliable and accurate watches on land. As international trade expanded, the importance of precise timekeeping grew, and sailors needed to rely on personal watches to maintain schedules and navigate successfully. John Harrison created the H4 in 1759, a marine chronometer that was crucial for solving the problem of determining longitude at sea. This watch was not only portable but also highly accurate, allowing sailors to navigate more effectively. It was pivotal in the British naval voyages, significantly impacting maritime navigation and safety. The growth of urban centers and trade increased the need for personalized and individual timepieces. Merchants, business people, they needed time management devices that were able to cater to the need of the modern period where international trade was also flourishing. That is why the development of the pocket watches during the 17th century aligned with this need of people for time management devices that were accurate and that they were individual enough. Abraham Louis Breguet is often regarded as the father of modern horology, and his innovations made timepieces more accessible and functional for the burgeoning class of merchants and traders. His Perpetuel pocket watch was one of the first to feature a self-winding mechanism. With this shift from public clocks to personal watches came a change on how people perceived time and used it. Individuals were now responsible for their own time management. This was a profound change in the societal relationship with time, as people became less dependent on community bells and clocks to organize their day. This new personal responsibility of time aligned well with the emerging Protestant work ethic, especially in regions influenced by Calvinism. The value placed on punctuality, self-discipline, and personal responsibility for one's time and labor became closely linked to the precision of personal timepieces. This transition from public to personal timekeeping was more than just a technical advancement. It marked a shift in how society interacted with time, moving from communal reliance on church bells and public clocks. Individuals began to take personal accountability and responsibility for their schedules and productivity. This shift laid the groundwork for Protestant regions like Geneva to merge these ideas together with their religious values, which led to the renowned Swiss watchmaking tradition. Every project starts with a question, and to be honest, the question that started this project for me was, why is Swiss watchmaking the best in precision and the most beautiful? Or why do we know Swiss watchmaking today? Now remember, watchmaking did not originate in Geneva or in Switzerland. So this was a question that was boggling my mind before I started, of course, entering into this rabbit hole of studying watches and politics. What happened is in 1540s, John Calvin and his followers moved to Geneva. Geneva was not particularly known for watchmaking, but they were craftsmen of jewelry mostly. In 1541, John Calvin, under his theocratic governance, forbid the making and wearing of jewelry. John Calvin, however, did not forbid the making of watches. Watches were tools rather than luxury items which were forbidden by this law. Later on in 17th century, with the moving of persecuted Protestants from France and Germany, Geneva became a hub that brought together Protestant ethics such as precision and dedication with the craftsmanship that French Protestants were bringing in watchmaking and Genevan Protestants or Genevan natives had in jewelry making, for example. So these Protestant reformations did not only affect religion per se, it affected the society, it affected the political climate, and it also affected the industry. Now, this is where I started thinking about the effect of Protestant ethics or the effect that John Calvin had when he took over and he led Geneva. First of all, according to Protestant teaching, every work that somebody does is to do it to please God. Independently, if somebody is studying or reading scripture, is making watches, all tilting the land. It was important to be done with dedication, with precision, and with moral grounds, as it was to be done in the name of God. So, the difference between sacred and secular was blurred. For a Genevan watchmaker then, presenting a craft, watch, was not something that was done towards the human master or the person that was paying it. They were making that watch as it was to be presented to God himself. At the same time, including everyday work, God was seeing everything. So although the human masters were not seeing what the watchmaker was doing every day, or even the inner workings and the components of the watch itself, it was God that was seeing everything. This is why then it came to be known that Swiss watches were beautiful inside as they were beautiful outside. A lot of watches were inscribed with biblical verses, such as whatever you do, work at it with all your heart, as working for the Lord, not for human masters. Or, for example, the eyes of the Lord are in every place. These values did not only affect the engineering or the movement of the watches, they also affected the design of the watches. By the end of 17th century, more skull watches started to be produced. They were symbols of memento mori, or the reminder of mortality. And sometimes they were inscribed with biblical verse such as, "Oh, remember how short my time is." Although jewelry was forbidden, by the end of 17th century, we have Latin crosses who were clocks or watches, but at the same time, they were decorated with emeralds. These were exempt, for example, from this ban on jewelry because they served a purpose of a reminder of Christ and of religious values. So these religious teachings, these reformations, and political governance of the Calvinists had a lasting legacy in what today we know as Swiss watchmaking. So any change that is brought, any reformation that is brought, it has effect in the industry, in religion, and in politics. That is why, for me, it was interesting to start studying how other political developments have affected horology or watches.